Okay, we've already done that. You know the drill here. This is all the popular links that we have a need of having nearby. Sponsor us. Well, Damien specifically. That's always good to do if you can. I invited Phil. He's actually been sick. So Phil Howard from Pomerani. We'll give him a long time to talk perhaps about some of the Pomerani products. They're very, very popular and they're doing a great job putting together MicroPython drivers for all their systems. So we'll have him along at some point. I wonder, I'm not sure if he's here tonight, but Barry Hay really helped out last month after I asked for some help with running the meetup and some of the other tasks that sort of surround it. Barry put his hand up and said he'd help with publishing the videos. So I sent him the Zoom recordings and then he chopped them up and put them on YouTube. So it was a huge help. So thanks, Barry. It's also why we've got a finally updated blog post. For those that don't know, we have like a Melbourne MicroPython meetup blog post. You can see the link. It's just hosted on a GitHub.io site. But it just links to all the videos and the slides. So we've got a record of all these events. It's mostly for our international friends. Lots of people really have trouble making it this time, as at least Stuart will appreciate at 5 o'clock in the morning over there. And thanks to others too. I mean, Damien, Andrew, I'm sure I'll forget Oliver and Lachlan and all the other people that help out. I really, really appreciate that help. But I will extend the call again. So if people can help out, Barry's already put up his hand again, but we can do things like I wrote that blog post, someone else could help with that. Even the slides that I put together, I could actually keep like a list of all of the links that I intend to talk about, and then we could share the Google slideshow and people could add the pictures and stuff, which actually takes a bit of time. So all sorts of things could help out if you're willing. I will soak up some of your time if you're able. Appreciate it. Don't feel obligated. If you can, that'd be great. Headlines. Raspberry Pi Pico. Damien's already talked heaps about this. The Pi Cow, as some people are calling it. I think that all of that was covered. Yeah. I was going to fill this page up with some of the stats that I sent along in an email, but there has been a lot going on. Damien, you and Jim have been churning out stuff. I've been drinking from the fire hose and watching all of the notifications at MicroPython, and there's more going on even in the last month than had been over the last few. And the last few covered the 1.19 release, which was already a busy period. So yeah, there's been a lot happening. So kudos for keeping on top of it. I'm sure you don't feel like you always are, but it's impressive to watch from the outside. This I just left in place because I don't think we've come to a conclusion yet. This was the slide from last month, but it looks like there's a willingness to move from the forum to the GitHub discussions. I'll keep people updated. I don't think we've made a decision on that yet, but it seems likely we'll move away from PHP BB at some point. Looking for nodding heads, maybe. Yeah. This one I left there by accident. Sorry, Andrew. New hardware. Okay, so the Newt. I have it here somewhere. Anyway, you can see it on the screen. It's much smaller than you expect though, and it's a really nice high-res display. It's one of those sharp hybrid e-ink displays. They're not e-inked specifically. They use very little power to maintain the image, and they use a little bit to update it. But so they're very low power, not quite as low as e-ink when you've got a stable image, but they're very sharp, very readable in daylight. So this Newt is available on Crowd Supply. We had talked about it before. I don't think I've got anything else about it. 10 touchpads. Darian's done a really good job of making the default software on it, which I think he's written in Arduino. It's quite nice. It's like capture. There's a web page capture to allow you to use your phone to connect to a Wi-Fi access point that it advertises, and then you can supply details for your own access point. And from that point, it's just it just runs really nicely. Really neat device. I quite like it. These LILYGO TQTs came out. I don't know if, hang on, let me stop the blurring somehow. Give me a moment. There's a few LILYGO products that we'll cover because they've been doing a lot of crazy work.
John's showing us something. What's it? What is it? The better ones. He's muted.
Yeah, same one.
Oh, right.
Sorry. There we go. So it's actually really quite tiny. It's quite small. You can see that my webcam is not the greatest. But it's a 128 by 128 LCD. There's 8 meg of flash on this thing. A couple of user buttons on the front. USB-C, which is nice. All for about $20. They're not the cheapest thing that LILYGO make, but they are really quite nice. One of the features that I really like is that you might not be able to see it, but the display has got like a little acrylic housing. You can possibly see it better on the screen. But the LCD is held in place really nicely, so it feels a lot more robust than a lot of other devices you'll get with these small little LCDs bouncing around on their flexible PCB. Yeah, Pico W's got a few of those. Probably will get a couple more. Banana Pi Leaf S3 came out. We covered this a couple of months ago, and they were they'd been announced, but they hadn't talked about shipping because I think they had trouble getting the ESP32 S3s, but they're available now. They're a nice, simple ESP32 S3 package. Have a lot of breakout pins. Quite nice. Banana Pi do a lot of the Raspberry Pi knockoffs, like the Cortex-A based Lynx SBCs. This is their first foray that I'm really aware of that tackles microcontrollers. What else did I write there? They're sort of marketing it as like a better S3 development board than Espressifs, and they're cheaper because they're like $11 from Ali, which is their official shop. They've also started investing a little bit in some videos and stuff on how to use it. So using interrupts to control the NeoPixel. That's with MicroPython, I believe. So yeah, looks quite neat. The PyCom PyGo. So PyCom, I'm sure many of you know PyCom are a company that formed a few years ago now, based around MicroPython, but then changed the licensing, which we've been a bit critical of. Made them kind of dead in the water to me because they went with a viral GPL license and it meant that I couldn't contribute to PyCom's world and continue to work on MicroPython upstream. But anyway, that aside, back in 2018, I backed this Kickstarter, which was for the PyGo that they were calling, and it had a bunch of, at the time it was quite unique. It had LoRa and BLE and GPS all in this little, quite a small package. Expected to deliver 2019, they're 3 years late. And then when it did deliver, unfortunately it was dead on arrival. So yeah, I credit to them for finally delivering. It's pretty impressive to be able to actually keep it together for that long. Apparently they found a firmware defect, which has to be fixed by, on the back there's a couple of flat pins that you attach pogos to with a cradle. They've now got to send a cradle out to everyone so they can update these devices. So I'm still waiting for my cradle, but well, yeah, fingers crossed for them, I guess. Anyway, it's been a long, arduous journey, that one. Hardware news, Espressif announced the C5. I think that happened since the last time we met. Might have happened around the time. But this one has RISC-V core, and it's got dual band Wi-Fi 6. They're the main features. So it's an interesting package for those two features alone. Otherwise,
it's got some more kick-ass features.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Such as?
You're going to have to wait.
Oh, okay.
I had to actually sign an NDA for the first time with this.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
They're getting really serious about trying to stem some of the things that they're. I don't know why they're. I mean, this is not even coming out until next year, by the way. It's not even going into samples until next year.
Yeah, well, I mean, they wouldn't commit to a delivery date even as well. So.
Right. So they release early, but then and now trying to be guarded on what information they talk about on it.
Yeah, right.
It's really bizarre. But there's some very cool things they haven't done before.
Cool.
Coming in.
I look forward to hearing.
So they'll be stable, obviously.
Oh,
Did
Totally
Did the NDA get you any nicer docs than usual?
I've got the first data sheet. It's not very long. It's 3 pages for the first data sheet, which is better than the single page. It's got my name stamped all over it. Like,
Yeah.
Wow.
they're really gone, yeah.
Are you allowed to tell us it's 3 pages? I mean, that
Sorry?
seems a lot.
No,
You're allowed
but
to tell us it's 3 pages.
It's,
we'll see on next time. It'll be short of a centimeter off.
no,
his
but
tongue or
they've done
something.
something interesting. It's not new, but it's new for them and not something that's kind of been done really this way before on a microcontroller, I don't think.
Cool.
So they're I think they're on the bandwagon with some other people out of the microcontroller space. Sorry, I'm being cryptic. As soon as I can say something, I will.
Look forward to it.
Yeah.
Cool. I'll push on. MakerFab's released their ESP32S3 parallel TFT device, which is it's pretty nice. It's 3.5-inch display, quite high resolution, 480 by 320. And we're seeing more of these kinds of displays come out, specifically parallel with higher res. And that's predominantly, as far as I can tell, because the S3 has accelerated LCD support. So I've seen a few of those sort of devices. We'll cover at least another one today. They had a device much like this, but it wasn't parallel, and they found that the frame rate could be improved quite a lot with that. So it's a nice device. LILYGO again. This one's something that's not pre-released, but it's like an introductory sale. It's a T-Display S3. There's only, I think they only made 50 of them available, and there's still some available. Again, an S3 base board, 8 meg PS RAM, 16 meg of flash. This display is also quite high resolution because it's less than 2 inches and it's 170 by 320. Again, parallel driven display. Quite a neat little package, at least on paper. They've also extended the acrylic housing idea, so you can see that's what's propping up the display, which is all good as far as I'm concerned.
If I'm not wrong, they've gone back to a micro USB.
No, I think you're wrong. I'm pretty sure it's USB-C.
Okay.
I'll double check because I think all of their new stuff has USB-C. I'd be shocked if it was micro. But now I'm looking at it, I'm doubting myself. They've got them on sale at the moment for $15 odd US. They're intending to sell them for about 22. Free shipping at the moment too. And you can only buy them direct from the LILYGO store, whereas usually they sell things through Ali. Kitronik have an Inventor's kit for the Raspberry Pi Pico. It's not the cheapest kit really, but it's pretty neat. Like it's got a neat little booklet. There's 10 different experiments in there and all the bits and pieces you need. It's kind of like the old Dick Smith kits that we used to have here in Australia. So yeah, quite neat for STEM stuff for anyone who wants to get an introduction to microcontrollers, and I think they called it physical devices or something. Yeah.
What do they code in that book? Do you know?
I believe it's MicroPython.
Okay.
I had assumed it was MicroPython. Maybe it's not. I think it is. Pomeroni released the Inventor 2040W, I think. I was struggling to get the release date, but I'm pretty sure it happened since our last meetup. This has got like a collection of stuff that is obviously geared around like beginning robotics stuff. So 2 motor drivers, up to 6 servos, battery charging. You can drive a little buzzer. It's got battery charging. It's got a bunch of NeoPixels. So yeah, it's pretty nice. Seed released the ESP32C3 board. So it's one of those tiny little Xiaos, of which they've now got 4 or so. But yeah, I've packed a fair bit into this. The only thing that's interesting is that they've chosen to go with an external antenna. I suspect because they didn't have space, or maybe they found the performance wasn't good enough on such a small board where they couldn't really give it the space needed. Ooh, sorry, I'm trying to read the chat window, but
I'm sorry, I was just saying that the Pomeroni launched a bunch of new boards around the Pico W, but I ordered them all on the first day and none of them have arrived yet. So.
right, okay. Right, sorry. They released quite a few boards. We covered a few of them last month, the motor and the servo, both of those two boards we talked about last month. The pixel pump we covered back in November, and Robin wasn't sure what was happening with it. He was trying to get it across the line. Turns out he has got it across the line. So it's now funded on crowd supply. They're $450 US. These things are designed to help with manual pick and place. So it's got like a vacuum assist, so you can pick up small components and plonk them down. So it's a step before you go to a pick and place machine. But fully MicroPython firmware. It's got all the code available. It's a pretty cool little device. He's also got, I've said, plus accessories here because he's made some neat little canisters to hold the reels of parts. He's also got like a foot pedal. There's a few bits and pieces that he's put together to support the product. The ISV wireless is now available on GroupGets. I should have a link here. I'll have to find one for you. This combines an ICE40 FPGA right there with an ESP32C3. So if you want an FPGA with Wi-Fi connectivity, this is your board. Battery charging, a bunch of RAM for the ESP32 as well. And they've got MicroPython running on it, so that's quite nice. They've only been out for a week or two, I guess. Got August 16th, I think, is the end of their funding run, and they're trying to get to 100 units. They've made, I think, 250 of them. Yeah, if you're interested in that space with FPGA stuff, I'm really interested in playing in this space. I just haven't had time to break it all out. But they do have MicroPython 1.19.1 running on this thing, so that's pretty cool. ESPRA has been announced, but no pricing or availability yet. It's a crowd supply project, but you can subscribe to it if you're interested in an ESP32 based power over Ethernet board. Yeah, and you can also source a fair bit of power over from the power over Ethernet as well. 15 watts, yeah, 15 watts. What we got for software? Anvil, I guess. I hadn't really heard much about Anvil until this announcement, which was where they announced that they were going to add Pico W support for their framework. Their framework is apparently designed to build web apps with nothing but Python is the catchphrase. And a lot of it's drag and dropping in a web page application. The tutorials and demos look pretty compelling. They've got an interesting web interface that you can build an application with. It is genuinely all Python all the way through. So that was pretty cool. One of the examples they give is displaying Morse code on an LED on the Pico W. So you connect it to their Anvil system. You create like an Anvil application in the web that accepts like a string input, and that will display Morse coded. Yeah, it'll display that string that you supply as Morse code on the LED on a remote device, which is pretty cool. We've also seen at least one PR coming in from these guys to update the SSL certificate on the Raspberry Pi Pico.
I met them at, actually, I didn't mention, I met them at EuroPython as well, and I intended, because they did that blog post tutorial. I had intended to talk about it in my talk, but my time management was appalling, so I never got around to it. But they're based in. They've got some folks based in here in the UK as well, so it was good conversation to connect with them. Yeah, right. The founder has a very much Welsh-looking name. It's devoid of too many vowels, but they seem like nice folks actually. And Ian's been very responsive in that PR, which has been great. At the moment, well, on the day of release, they actually had pre-built MicroPython binaries, but it looked pretty clear that they want to push things upstream. So we just, so they just need to manage their, what do they call it? The Anvil they call it something, I didn't write it down, but yeah, anyway, the Anvil connection is the part that they want to take care of. I stumbled across MiniShell, which is it's a shell for MicroPython. It makes it look like a little bit like a Unix shell. So you can drop into the REPL and then import MiniShell. And then you have regular Unix commands to manage some of the files. I've seen a couple of these efforts before. This one looked okay. I had trouble
running some of the, in particular, the plugins. So it's got like a basic set of commands, and then it's got a plugin architecture, and they supply a bunch of plugins and show you how to make your own plugins. It's kind of a neat idea. Sometimes I'm a little frustrated at the REPL when you're trying to do some basic things just to, while I'm here, I just want to delete that file or whatever. And if I had Mini-Shell installed, that would be a convenient way to do that. There's a library by Raphael called uBeacon. It has examples on how to do BLE beacons, and it's got quite a few different ones. Really neatly compact kind of library, and the examples show how to do any of these kinds of beacons, which is pretty nice. I like the fact that his library actually isn't even bound to the Bluetooth API. It's about creating the data structures that all of these things need. And then his examples just tie those data structures in with the BLE advertising. So it's quite a neat way to do it. Projects. Kevin McAleer has been busy this last month thrashing about with the Pico W. He's been crushing it. Probably the first one he started with, I guess, was the Big Mouth Billy Bass. So he took one of these things apart and then threw in a Raspberry Pi Pico W inside it and allowed you to control it remotely. For anyone that hasn't seen it, the fish sort of, you can open its mouth and make it bend and makes it look like it's singing. He also had this Ghostbusters inspired, what do they call it? The PKE Wi-Fi scanner. So these arms are connected to a servo and they pop out depending on the strength of the Wi-Fi signal. It's cute, pretty neat idea. And then he's used one of those Inventor boards that we mentioned before from Pomeroni to create this tract-based robot. So yeah, go have a look. He does really good write-ups and videos on how he builds it, so it's worth a watch. There's a smart irrigation system from Jonathan at HackLab in South Africa. All of the code's available, but yeah, it has solar panel powered, checks the temperature, checks for moisture, and yeah, he's got all the code there so you can do it yourself. Another weather-related one was a weather station. This one was really well written up, and it also used InfluxDB in a reasonable way, push all the data to it. And yeah, it's got a nice little LCD display as well. Well worth a look. And then there's Pico Pong. So John Chinner had a Raspberry Pi Pico and a Pomeroni Unicorn hat and decided to make Pong with it. And it's worth going to even just this Twitter page and just see he's got the paddles you would expect and the ball, and it looks really responsive with this device. It's pretty slick. And he's published the code, MicroPython code. Core Electronics, mentioned before briefly, they had a great video on making a garage door opener using the Pico W, hooking into the garage door signals. Yeah, it's really well written up, quite polished. They do these videos pretty well. Normally, I was going to write what you've been working up, but seeing as you're here, do you want to spend a minute just talking about it? Because there was, you asked people to vote on projects and you're also doing some documentation.
Okay, so I'm in the middle of writing 3 books at the moment, which is probably 2 or 3 too many. But the short guide for the Pico W is, it's really got two halves to it. The first half is just guiding people through what they need to know if they don't even know Python, if they've never used a breadboard before, or if they've used a Pico W but not used a Pico but not a W. And then there's a kind of bridge project which is web server based. But the 3 main projects in the guide, the guide, by the way, is going to be completely free. It's CC by attribution, but give it away. That's the goal, is just to get it in as many hands as possible. 3 projects. I added a new one this morning because I suddenly had a bright idea, and it looks like it's going to be pretty easy to do. We've talked about the problems in finding Raspberry Pis in the shops. And there's that great Raspberry Pi locator program, which does a pretty good job of tracking availability in real time. So I thought, why not get a Pico to read the RSS feed and use an LED to tell you, hey, there's Picos, there's Raspberry Pis available, buy them now. And I think that's actually going to be quite a popular project. And it looks like it's going to be fairly easy. One of them is really aimed at people who have a family member that they need to summon remotely. So basically you leave a Pico with a buzzer in a teenager's room, and it's running a web server, and so you can buzz them from your phone to say, come and do your chores, or come and have a meal, or whatever. And the third one is a minimalist weather station, but it's really trying to show people how you can use MQTT to then broadcast the output and pick that up on, you know, whatever you want to write or use. Lots of fun. Most of the hardware is now working and prototyped, and most of the software is, it's just a matter of writing the text and fitting all the stuff in. And I'm tweeting lots as I work, so there's probably a fire hose of information which you will need to filter. Okay.
Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you. I'll include your Twitter account so people can follow you. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting projects you've been undertaking, but also drumming up interest about as well, which has been great. Good.
Thanks.
Tutorials. We mentioned Kevin before, but he has a good tutorial on how Watchdog timers in MicroPython work. It's quite simple, but it's really well explained, and as he does really professional sort of videography on these things. Are good. Elektor are getting more involved with MicroPython. They've released a tutorial and a video on measuring your heart rate with it. Quite a lot of detail. And while I was going to mention them, I had a few other links that have been left over from the last couple of months, but they've got a couple of new shows, Engineering Insights, which is kind of like a engineering news show, and then there's Lab Talk, which is more of a deep dive into various topics. And they've also got the MicroPython for Microcontrollers book, which is about $40 or something. I haven't got a copy of that one yet. So. Quick Bytes, because I couldn't create slides for everything, but Stuart, I think this came from you. There was uMath, which looks like it was an old symbolic algebra library for MicroPython. Seems to work, but if you're interested in symbolic algebra stuff, then you might want to check it out. It looks pretty useful, at least as a base to build on. There's a good review of the Pomeranian Tufty, which is a color LCD that they have. It was from Tom's Hardware. There's an old Tech Explorations MicroPython with the ESP32 video course that I haven't taken. I don't know much about it, but it has cropped up a few times. But they recently updated it so the material all works on 118. They just updated it and announced it as 119 was released. So I wouldn't be surprised if they updated that to 119 shortly too. M5 Stack have got a bunch of things that are sort of on the verge of coming out, but one of them that did pop out was the 7-segment clock display, this thing here. It's interesting because it's got, it's I2C controlled. They've got like an STM32 F0 in the back of it. So it's pretty easy to communicate with. And the Pico label plate, this is this thing over here. Someone was fed up with the fact that you couldn't read the labels on the Pico. So it's actually a 3D print that fits over the top of the Raspberry Pi Pico. And also there's a printout so that you can print it out and stick it on top of your 3D print. It's over-engineering the solution, but I like it. More stuff. There's a really good tutorial on, a really long tutorial on creating like a web server with MicroPython on the Raspberry Pi Pico W. They do it at the socket level, so they implement the whole web server themselves. But they're turning on an LED and turning it off from a website over the Wi-Fi, which is quite neat. I found someone had salvaged some old Nixies and are driving it from MicroPython. Why not? Anything with Pixies, with Nixies is going to get my interest. And there was also this model railway station departure board. So there's a little OLED. See us, Jan? A little OLED that's apparently the right size, and it's meant to be show all the detail that you would expect to see on one of these boards. So yes, it's a good write-up on how it's made and the code that's available for it. I think that's about it, except that I wanted to, Dad, this is the book I've given you. But Open Circuits was released, and it's this isn't MicroPython related, it was just something that was interesting to finish with. No Starch Press book by a couple of guys, Eric and Windle. They basically just took a whole bunch of small parts and did some really fine macro photography on it, because they're beautiful images and they really help explain how some of these devices work. So I took a couple out just for an example. This is like a 3.5mm jack plugged into the socket, and both of them have been cut apart really neatly. And so you can see how all the spring-loaded bits and pieces kind of work. I figure that I'm not the only engineer that would like this stuff, so I thought I'd share it. What is that? That is a close-up of a smartphone camera. So the lens configuration that is in front of a smartphone camera. Lots of aspherical components, just extraordinary engineering that goes into this nowadays. And you can sort of see the, yeah, it's really cool. This is a multi-layer board. Again, I think it's for a phone, but you can also see the blind vias, so you can see the joins between the layers. Yeah, it's pretty neat. Great photography. I think it's 300 pages or something. There's lots of really cool stuff in there. So I can recommend that. And that is all I got for you.